You know, we all kind of think the internet is forever, right? That once something is online, it's there for good. But what if I told you that's just not true? That our digital world is actually, well, incredibly fragile, and huge chunks of it are vanishing every single day without us even noticing.
Oh, we've all been there. You're going down some internet rabbit hole, you click what looks like the perfect link, and bam, you hit a digital brick wall. That 404 not found error feels like just a small annoyance, but it's actually a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. It's basically a little digital tombstone for a piece of the web that's just gone.
And this isn't just happening once in a while. Get this. A recent Pew Research study found that a staggering 38% of all the web pages that were online back in 2013 had completely disappeared just 10 years later. Think about that. Almost 4 out of every 10 pages from not that long ago, poof, vanished.
And believe it or not, it gets even worse. This decay is hitting the places we trust the most. Let's talk about Wikipedia for a second. That same study, it found that 54% of Wikipedia pages have at least one dead link in their references. That means more than half of the pages on the encyclopedia we all rely on are pointing to evidence that has just vanished into the digital ether.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at just how big this problem is, and then we'll get into the root cause, something called digital obsolescence. We'll even dive into a crazy data loss story from inside Google. After that, we'll see how the pros fight back, what it actually costs to save all this data, and then we'll wrap up by asking the big question. What does this all mean for our digital legacy?
Okay, so let's be really clear about one thing. This is not some far-off theoretical problem for the future. This digital decay, this slow erasure of our world, is happening right now, all around us, on the sites we use every single day. And just look at how widespread this is. We're not talking about old, forgotten blogs here. 23% of news sites have broken links. That's almost a quarter of what we call the first draft of history, and it's already crumbling. And government sites, the ones we need for, critical info, they're not doing much better, with 21% having broken links. This isn't random. It's systemic.
So the big question is, why? Why is all this stuff disappearing? Well, the root of the problem has a name: digital obsolescence, and it's the engine driving this whole disappearing act.
So what does that even mean? Simply put, it's what happens when the technology you need to actually read a file, whether it's the physical device or the software, just goes extinct. The data might still be perfectly fine, but it's like we've lost the key to the treasure chest.
I mean, just think about how fast our physical storage changes. In just about 30 years, we went from these giant floppy disks to the tiny USB drives we have today. Now, be honest, when's the last time you actually saw a floppy disk drive in the wild? Exactly. The hardware vanishes, and all the data on those disks is basically locked away forever.
And this isn't just one single problem either. Obsolescence actually comes in a few different flavors. You've got functional, that's easy, the thing just breaks. Then there's systemic, where maybe a new software update just won't read your old files anymore. Technical is when something new and shiny and better just comes along and replaces the old stuff. And finally, postponement. That's a weird one. It's when you update one part of a system but not another, and they just stop talking to each other properly.
Okay, to really get a handle on how bad this can get, we need a real-world example. And boy, do we have one. We're going to go inside Google itself. And we're not talking about old floppy disks here. This is a story about a massive, modern-day data disaster. All right, picture this. It's 2012. Google Music is a big deal. But hidden deep in its code, a tiny bug in a deletion program starts to, go rogue. It was supposed to delete certain things for privacy, but instead it started quietly and invisibly deleting people's actual music files. And before anyone even had a clue what was happening, it had wiped out the references for around 600,000 audio files. That affected the music libraries of 21,000 different users. All their music, the songs they bought, the stuff they'd uploaded, just gone from their view. You can just feel the panic in this one quote from Google's internal report on what happened. When the engineer finally figured out the cause, that it was their own system deleting the files, he, and I quote, almost has a heart attack. I mean, can you even imagine? This was a disaster they had created themselves. So what happened next was this absolutely insane recovery mission. They had to call in over 5,000 backup tapes, which literally had to be driven in by truck.
Then, people had to manually load thousands of these tapes, one by one. In the end, they restored 1.5 petabytes of data, just to bring those files back from the dead. The scale of that is just mind-boggling.
Okay, that Google story is terrifying. But the good news is, it also points to the solution. The only reason they could recover anything is because they had a plan for failure. And that brings us to the core strategy professionals use: defense in depth.
The whole idea behind it is pretty simple, actually. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You build multiple layers of protection, kind of like a castle with a moat, high walls, and guards inside. If one layer fails, you've got another one to back it up. It's all about expecting things to go wrong and being ready for it.
So, layer 1 is something you use every single day. Soft deletion. Think of it as your computer's recycle bin or trash folder. When you delete a file, it's not really gone, right? It just sits there for a while, just in case you go, oops, I need that back. It's your first line of defense against simple human error.
Layer 2? Well, that's what saved Google's bacon: backups. But here's the crucial part. Not just any backups. The secret sauce is diversity. A software bug that messes up your hard drives probably won't affect an old-school tape drive. That's why, even today, magnetic tape is still the unsung hero of the data world.
And finally, layer 3 is all about being proactive. It's called early detection. Basically, you have automated programs constantly checking your data, like a little robot patrol looking for anything weird or corrupted. They're like the immune system for your data, catching a problem before it turns into a full-blown catastrophe.
And all this leads to a really powerful idea that came straight from the folks at Google. They say, backups don't matter. What matters is recovery. Think about that. It's one thing to have a backup. It's another thing entirely to know for a fact that you can actually use it when the chips are down.
Okay, so building all these defenses and trying to keep data forever, it sounds expensive. And yeah, it is. But the price tag isn't just about money. The forever cost is actually much, much bigger than that.
When you talk about the cost of saving data, you're really talking about two different things. There's the economic cost, right? The actual hardware, the buildings, paying people to manage it all. But then there's the ecological cost. The energy to run the servers, the air conditioning to cool them, the e-waste that's left over. It all adds up.
And the numbers can be really deceptive. Check this out. Some researchers figured out that storing a single web link for 100 years costs about 5 cents. That sounds amazing, right? But that's just the storage. It doesn't include the salaries for the engineers, the cost of the building, the R&D. The storage is cheap, but keeping it forever is incredibly expensive.
And that ecological cost is huge. Here's something that might surprise you. When you look at a server's carbon footprint, you'd think making the thing is the worst part, right? Nope. The vast, vast majority of its impact comes from just plugging it in and letting it run for years. All that electricity 24/7. So, in a very real way, preserving our digital past is literally warming our planet's future.
Which brings us to one last and pretty tough question. We've seen how things decay, how tech becomes obsolete, and how immensely expensive it is to save anything. So, what does that mean for the future of our culture?
There's this great quote that I think just nails the problem. Digital documents last forever, or 5 years, whichever comes first. It's funny, but it's also terrifyingly true. We live in a time where we are creating an unbelievable amount of information, all while losing it at a rate we've never seen before. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Ancient clay tablets have survived for 5,000 years. Do you think the websites, photos, and documents we're making right now will even last 50? If our entire digital world is built on such shifting sands, what story of us are we actually leaving behind? And maybe the most important question of all, who gets to decide what's worth the enormous cost of saving?